Hello, everybody. Last section of the chapter two here, and we're getting into the first two political parties that were born in the United States of America. And we're not talking about under the Articles of Confederation. We're talking about under the United States Constitution, where George Washington is the president. And you're going to see these political parties really started to form in the creation and the making of the United States Constitution. People started to agree on how much power the president should have, how much power the state should have, and they basically split into what we call the Federalists. And I'm going to use the Anti-Federalists just so we get two base political parties so I don't confuse you. But the Anti-Federalists' original name was the Democratic Republicans, and you can see how that has become our two political parties they are today. But so we have the Federalists versus the Anti-Federalists. So let's get into this a little bit. They're going to form under George Washington, the Federalists versus the Anti-Federalists, and a lot of it had to do with how much power the Constitution should have, how much power the president should have, and what needed to happen in order for this to happen. Okay, so we're going to take a look at this, and the first one is the Federalists. And the Federalists, and you guys have all seen the famous playwright Hamilton. Okay, so we're talking about Hamilton. He was the first Secretary of Treasury under General George Washington, the first president of the United States of America. And he's going to lead the first political party, which is known as the Federalists. We were deep in debt, so he devises this plan to put taxes on things such as whiskey, which is eventually going to happen in Pennsylvania with the Whiskey Rebellion, and imports to raise revenue for the government. In order to do this, he created, and we'll talk a little bit about this later on, but he created something known as the Elastic Clause on the Constitution. Basically, all the laws that are stated in the Constitution of the United States, it says that we have the power to tax. The federal government has the power to tax. Well, the Federalists and Alexander Hamilton said there's no possible way that we can tax without a national bank. So where it says taxing in the Constitution, what they did is he took it, and I call it the Elastic Clause, okay, or the Necessary and Proper Clause is another word that's used, is that they take this and they pull it like a rubber band, and right around here they say, well, in order for taxes to happen, there has to be a national bank. So a national bank has to be established in order for taxes to happen. Therefore, we created a law based off of the Constitution. We pulled it from the word taxes, and then we created our Federal Reserve System known as the National Bank. Now, a lot of people don't like this because if we're creating laws that are necessary and proper for the Constitution to work, well, what's to say that the president's not going to create things like more power for executive orders or a lot of different things that are involved in our the presidency or in Congress today. So he really gained the support of President Washington because President Washington knew that in order for to have an effective government, there had to be some power and able to do these things. So President Washington really supported Hamilton. Opposition to Hamilton came from a guy, and you can see Hamilton is going to, and you guys are going to read this, he's going to be the leader of the Federalists, and we have Thomas Jefferson, who's going to be the leader of the Anti-Federalists at the time. He's going to strongly oppose Hamilton's plan. He's our first Secretary of State, so he's going to deal with foreign nations. He's the author of the Declaration of Independence, so a very well-known person during this time. And he had a strict interpretation of the Constitution and must restrict itself to those powers specifically stated in the document. So Hamilton's here and Washington's here, and they're creating this thing called the Elastic Clause, or the Necessary and Proper Clause. And they're pulling these things and saying, well, in order for taxes to happen, the government has to take control of the national bank. Jefferson said, there is no possible way that we should have a national bank. We should only have the powers that are directly written in the Constitution. Therefore, Thomas Jefferson had a strict interpretation of it. Alexander Hamilton and George Washington, those guys had a loose interpretation. Well, if there's going to be taxes, well, we have to have a national bank. Therefore, we have to make it a law to have a national bank, and we have to have currency and be able to do these things. Jefferson said, no way, Jose, that should not happen. Okay, so that was a big disagreement during this time. So we have Jefferson, who has a strict interpretation. Anything that's written in the Constitution, because it has to stay in the Constitution, it cannot be changed. Okay? Power specifically stated. Hamilton, on the other hand, and the Federalists wanted for a stronger federal government. So the Necessary and Proper Clause. Like I said, the Constitution gave the government the right to charter a bank. It was necessary to exercise its duties, in this case, coining money and collecting taxes. Southerners are really going to oppose this idea of a stronger federal government because the Anti-Federalists, Jefferson from Virginia, the South, a lot of these rich southern states were very wealthy as it was, and why should we try to help the North, okay, pay off, and the federal government pay off the debt that they're in from being under the Articles of Confederation? We still have this debt lingering. In fact, if we put tariffs on their stuff that we're going overseas, the southern states are saying, well, it's going to hinder our trade with these foreign nations. And that really PO'd them off when it came to these things. So most southern states already paid off their debt, and they objected to helping the federal government pay off theirs. Okay? And on the other hand, Hamilton and Washington said, well, if we put import and export tax on different things, it's going to help our economy grow and force people to buy things during this time from the United States to shipping things out. Well, the South at the time wanted to kind of go out there and sail. So if you think about it right now, at this point in time, most Republicans at this point in time, and President Trump, he wants to bring back, okay, the businesses in the United States of America. And we have the North Atlantic Free Trade Agreement under President Obama. He wanted to expand our trade, allowing Canada and Mexico to freely trade with us. So you kind of can see and draw a kind of a thing that we were arguing, the first two political parties were arguing much similar about the same thing. The South was arguing about trade. In this case, the South would be representative of trading overseas and doing different things along those lines, while the federal government at this point in time wanted to keep things within the United States of America and take care of our own debt and knock it out in that. And result of this, okay, this agreement and passing the Constitution, if you guys would pass the Federalists and Anti-Federalists, this was in the negotiations for the Constitution. At this point in time, the Federalists, okay, George Washington and Hamilton said, well, if you guys agree to allowing the necessary and proper clause, we will move the capital city. At this point, it was happening in New York, okay, at the Congress site in New York. And then for 10 years after that, they had a temporary Capitol Hill in Philadelphia. But at this point in time, it was in New York. They said, we will agree to move the capital to the South, okay, to represent you guys in Washington, D.C., if you agree to have the necessary and proper clause. And it was agreed upon. And that's kind of what got us to agree with the necessary and proper clause, giving the federal government more power, okay, during this time. But we know the political parties are going to continue versus the Anti-Federalists and the Federalists. John Adams is going to be a part of the Federalist Party with Alexander Hamilton, and they're going to support ratification of the Constitution, a change in the Constitution, and a strong national government. And they're going to support large landowners, merchants, tariffs, and government regulations aimed at supporting United States businesses at this time. On the other hand, the Democratic Republicans, or like I like to call them, the Anti-Federalists, were led by Jefferson. Okay, and they favored stronger state governments and a weaker national government. Well, it makes sense. You know, Hamilton's from the north, Jefferson's from the south, yada, yada, yada. John Adams is from Massachusetts. So we see these guys, and he wanted a weaker national government, stronger state governments. Well, Virginia was very wealthy. Jefferson had slaves of his own, and many of these large landowners had profitable trading businesses overseas, and they didn't want the federal government to have any more power than what they had. They kind of enjoyed the power they had under the Articles of Confederation. They favored the interests of small farmers and debtors at this time, and favored a hands-off approach to economics. Both parties did agree that only the educated upper class should serve in positions of power and make decisions about government policies. So if we're going back even into the beginning of the creation of 1791, when the Bill of Rights were passed, in 1788, when all these things started to be passed with the United States Constitution, even at that point in time, all right, our founding fathers agreed that if you're not educated, you should not have a say in the government. Okay, why do you think widespread education, looking back at Chapter 1, is so important in our country today? Well, because if we are educated, we will be able to make educated decisions on who's going to lead us and policies that are going to, form and help shape our country. And our founding fathers believed that if you're not educated, you should not be able to vote at this point in time. And that's what they believed, and that they should only be able to make government policies. Unfortunately, many of the people that were educated at this time were rich, wealthy, white business owners that either owned a lot of land and had plantations or had big businesses in the north. Some conflicts at this time facing the nation was, once again, France and Britain were at war. We had just gotten done fighting the Revolutionary War, and we didn't want to get involved with another war. Unfortunately, the War of 1812 is going to find us, okay? But at this point in time, one of the big things Washington says is don't get involved in foreign conflicts. Concentrate on what's going on with ourselves. Well, on the other hand, the Democratic Republicans, because of the trade, or should I say the Anti-Federalists, wanted to support the French in this war, okay? And the Federalists at this time said, no, let's just concentrate on getting ourselves out of debt. Let's concentrate on ourselves, building our country, our military, okay, and let's support being neutral at this time. Well, that was a big break during this time because we thought we were going to lose our allies, so on and so forth, okay? If you guys have any questions for this one, about what's going on, please let me know. I just want to real quick show you guys kind of what you guys are going to be doing here. So after you've watched this PowerPoint, okay, you guys are going to go in and do the compare and contrast Jefferson versus Hamilton. And you can transfer this into Notability, and you can go on to the second page if you like, but basically there's two stories. The story of how Alexander Hamilton grew up and how Thomas Jefferson grew up, where they came from, who their parents are, where they went to school, how they rose to power in Congress and not Congress, but through their representative states, and how they kind of had their positions, and then eventually what happens to them both. But there's going to be the same questions on both of the stories. So when you go in there, you're going to see two documents, and they're both 2 pages long, front and back. So you're going to read those, and as you read those, what you can do is you can go in and read them, kind of jot down, answer the questions for one on a separate sheet of paper before you do this, and then read the other one, jot down the questions. Doesn't have to be in complete sentences. And all you're going to do is you're going to compare those two stories up to each other, and then you're just going to make bullet points on them. So if you find a difference between Jefferson and Hamilton, I'll give you one. Bullet point, boom, Hamilton. First Secretary of Treasury, boom, Jefferson. First Secretary of State, that's different. The same, okay? All right, so whatever the same is on there, maybe they were both educated, college education. You write that in the middle where it says same, right over the line. And I don't care if you cross the line. You can do it with your pen after you transfer the Notability, whatever you want to do. So after you do that, you've compared and contrasted them. Try to get about 7 to 8 of them for both of them. You don't have to do just kind of skip around, skim it around, and turn this in for 10 points before Saturday. Saturday, I believe I'm giving you till 12 o'clock Saturday night. So go ahead and turn that in before 12 o'clock Saturday night. If you have any questions about this, please get a hold of me. Next week, we will be reviewing on Monday, okay, with our study guide, and then we will be getting into the test on Tuesday, okay, and then we're moving right along, all right? If you have any questions, like I said, please inbox me, and have a nice weekend, everybody.